Hello and welcome to another episode of Taylor Talks Comics. Today I'm going to talk about possibly the greatest Marvel collected edition of the last few years. It's a Wolverine Weapon X Gallery Edition by Barry Windsor-Smith. Stay tuned. Alright, so we're back. This is the Gallery Edition of Weapon X. It came out last year, and it is out of print, so you might have to hunt at some local comic book shops and stuff for this edition. But I hope that Marvel does reprint it. They haven't reprinted any of their Gallery Editions yet, but this one in particular I think needs to be reprinted. So I'm going to show off the book here real fast to before I dive into the story and whatnot. But these Gallery Editions are massively oversized. They're a little bit taller than the DC Absolute editions. And it's not in a slipcase or anything, but it is slightly taller. Like if you have a Kallax shelf, it will not fit in there unless you really shove it in there. But just a little example of the size here. This is a standard comic book issue. And you can see that measuring it up, it's much wider than and taller than it. So you get that oversized artwork, which is great when we're talking about Barry Windsor-Smith and his super detailed artwork. So this is the cover here. This is the spine. You have a nice white spine. Weapon X with just Barry Windsor-Smith's name on it. And then the back image here. And it tells you what it collects here. Which is Marvel Comics Presents 72 through 84. Wolverine 166. And Uncanny X-Men 205. A little description on the back. If we open it up, there are some cool end papers here. Where it's like one side of an image. And then the back end papers are this other side of his face. So it's kind of like a blown up image from Barry Windsor-Smith. And then here's the title page. And the table of contents. So, the credits page. And there was more than just Barry Windsor-Smith that worked on this. But it's mostly just BWS. But there's one issue of Uncanny X-Men 205 was written by Chris Claremont. Frank Thierry wrote the short excerpt from Wolverine 166 and some of the coloring and whatnot, but it's mostly just BWS. And we have the contents over here on the left, and it gets into the story, which Marvel Comics Presents was a anthology series, and this was presented through 12 issues of it. And so that's why you don't have covers and stuff. There wasn't like full issues. Like you can see here if you just do the math. The first strips here are just like 8 pages each until you get to the last one. I think what was that, 13-ish or 13 pages, and then I can't even see, what is that? 98, and then 13. Last few are like full issues. And then you get into it. So what makes this the best Marvel collected edition of the last few years is the way it's presented and the story involved. I think the Weapon X story from Barry Windsor-Smith is truly one of the all-time great Marvel comics. I think it should be held up there with like Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns. And it is of that same era. But I think I can't for the life of me understand why it's not. I think the only reason possibly why is because it was serialized in a anthology comic. Like Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns got their own prestige format releases by single issues, and this didn't. So I really think that's the only reason why not, because the artwork and the story itself is just like a masterpiece. And it is all Barry Windsor-Smith's artwork and his writing in here. And if you haven't read Barry Windsor-Smith's Monster, that was released by Fantagraphics a couple years ago, that was my favorite comic book that came out in 2019. I think his artwork and story just melds together so beautifully. And his detailed artwork is just absolutely amazing. You can just see all the like noodling and stuff of all these different wires. There's just like painstaking detail in here, which is probably why he wasn't able to keep a monthly title up to where he could do this like a monthly series. But I digress. The reason why this is the first time that the colors on this has been collected in a way that the coloring is as faithful to the fidelity of the original series. So all the other reprints, because this has been reprinted a number of times before this in like trade paperbacks, premiere hardcovers and whatnot, but they always recolored it and made it more modern looking, which is really unfortunate because Barry Windsor-Smith's coloring was such a detail of his artwork. Like it's so melded together perfectly with what his artwork looks like, and what are the colors that he pick up, especially all these like kind of psychedelic, poppy colors that go with this very tragic, violent story. So when they recolored it in all these other editions, it really just took away from it. And when this was coming out, I was really excited about this gallery edition, and like period, because I love the story. But when I found out the coloring was being done faithfully, I was really excited. And the person that gave it like their note of confidence, if you will, was Jose Villarrubia. And he didn't work on this project at all, but he had shown in the past his issues with the previous coloring. So when this was coming out, he did some comparisons to the original comic book issues and then also the recolored versions and then what this looks like. And he was giving his vote of confidence for how faithful it was. It's also printed on this like matte paper. Like there is a semi-gloss to it, but it's mostly matte, which I think picks up the color in a way that is unlike any of the previous colored collected editions. It is more closer to the newsprint that the original stories were published on. So I think that helps as well. Because that's one thing that when they recolor these in collected editions, like your typical Marvel omnibuses or epic collections, is they don't take that into account that the original coloring was done on newsprint, which soaked up the colors in a different way. So when you take the exact coloring job and print it on a glossy paper, the coloring is going to be different. And also when they recolor it, they kind of usually take liberties of their own and kind of give it like that high saturated, garish looking color to try to make it more appealing, I guess, for a modern audience. But I really wish they just go as faithful as possible to the original. But the entire story is told, this is like the first attempt at telling Wolverine's origin story. And which is something that was always shrouded in mystery. Even back from his debut in, was it The Incredible Hulk 181, all the way through Uncanny Giant Size X-Men #1, and all the way through Chris Claremont's early Wolverine run. Like they give you like little seeds, little threads of what his origin was, but would never go full on and explain it to you, which is kind of the appeal of the character, was that you didn't know where he came from, and you just picked up little pieces here and there because he didn't even remember. He doesn't even remember this event because it was so traumatic, mentally and physically traumatic, was these experiments. This is the Weapon X experiment where he had the antimentium plastered onto his bones and his claws. And it's all told mostly through the doctor's kind of narration of the experiment. These are like these kind of evil mad scientists, if you will, that are doing this experiment on him and putting all this, using his restorative health powers to be able to put all this antimony on him to make this like weapon of destruction that they can use for the Canadian army, Canadian military. And that's kind of the story of it. You see him go through all of that trauma and become like this animalistic, violent monster. So a lot of ways it kind of mirrors like a Frankenstein story, where you have the mad scientist creating the monster, but in a more modern way. And I mean modern to Frankenstein, because this was a story that I think this came out in the late 80s, early 90s, I think. When was this published? 88. It's late 80s. Then you get this epilogue from Larry Hama, who had his long run on the Wolverine solo series, and he talks about how this is a piece of masterpiece comic book, and he talks about how it's a story that influenced a lot of his tales, but also he contrasts it to like Image comics of the era, the extreme 90s artwork of that era. And then here's the story that took place in Wolverine 166. It's just a flashback of the Weapon X program that Barry Windsor-Smith did the artwork for. The coloring was done by someone else, so you can definitely tell the coloring is different. but it's just a little excerpt in that story that's included in here. And you get the X-Men 205 issue, which has this incredible cover. And if you have the newest Uncanny X-Men Omnibus Volume 5, this was the direct market variant cover. But this was also a story by Barry Windsor-Smith, written by Chris Claremont for this one. But it is back from his Weapon X days. And you can just tell it fits right in line with the Barry Windsor-Smith artwork of the Weapon X story. So flip through that. You even got some cameo appearances for Power Pack, which is awesome. It's kind of interesting to see the wholesome kids of Power Pack mixed in with this kind of violent Frankenstein story of Wolverine. Then we get some pinups and stuff from Barry Windsor-Smith himself, and some cover artwork of the story. And then, these are all the extras in the back I'm showing off here. Yeah, that's the wraparound cover, which that's the image that you see on the in papers. And you get some original artwork pieces here, where you get to see the pencils and inks, which I'd love to see like an artist edition of this too. I'd probably buy that as well, if there's an artist edition for Barry Windsor-Smith. Just being able to read the story with his original art would be amazing. Even though I do think the color is so important for the story, but anytime you can look and examine Barry Windsor-Smith artwork is amazing. An amazing opportunity. And then here's some different cover options of the different collected editions that they have, and it's a good example of showing you what the garish looking colors are. So if I go back to... So that cover is like the most closest to like the original colorings of Barry Windsor-Smith, and this is like what the more modern recoloring looks like. So you can just see like what they did to it. Like this looks more realistic probably, but I love the comic book art of the poppier colors. That to me looks more like a comic book, and I'm always going to vote for this style of coloring versus this one. So that's a good example of what how this was collected in previous editions and how it was recolored. Here's some more different hardcovers they've released in the past. Here's another recolored edition of that image and of that image. And then here's some other variant covers that Barry Windsor-Smith did that have some sort of relation to just the X-Men or sometimes the Weapon X program. Like here's the homage he did. This is Deadpool, but it's like the homage of what Wolverine was going through on that Uncanny X-Men 205 cover. Then here's another, which is a more modern, this is 2001 Barry Windsor-Smith, and the figures look even more squattier. It's a very different style for Barry Windsor-Smith. And then here's Deadpool 59, Deadpool 60, and then some biographies. So that's the book. It's amazing. If you can get your hands on this, the cover price is only $45. So if you find this at like a retailer that has like 50% off or whatnot, you get it for pretty cheap. But also if you just find it at your LCS or any other comic book shops, there might be some of these collecting dust somewhere. And then hopefully Marvel reprints it. But again, I think this is truly one of Marvel's best collected editions to come out within the last few years. And I think if you've got to get your hands on this. It's just an incredible story. So thanks for watching. Give the video a thumbs up if you like the content. Comment down below with what you think the best Marvel collected editions are of the last few years. Any sort of stories you have of your love of Barry Windsor-Smith or Wolverine or anything like that. Any of those comments are welcome. Subscribe if you haven't already, and then share this video with your friends. I'd really appreciate that. So thank you.